So let's go back to 2005, before EA had the rights to the Star Wars licensing with games. We had Battlefront 1 in 2004 and Battlefront 2 in 2005, and these games were the best way to experience large-scale battles in the Star Wars universe. And let me tell you, back in my day, your boy put in some absolute hours into these games. You had instant action, galactic conquest, and of course the amazing Jedi v Sith mode on Tatooine. Now, I know the EA Battlefront weren't all bad, and hell, even after a lot of updates, Battlefront 2 is a blast to play nowadays. But let's be real, sometimes you just can't quite top the classics. And that's why today we are jumping into the action of the original Battlefront multiplayers. And I know there's a huge difference between the games I've covered before this and now, where the last previous games I covered were games that were mainly story focused and had a multiplayer added on, where this one is a franchise that kind of got buried by itself. And by that, of course, I mean with the re-release series by EA, they sort of want you to play those ones obviously more than they want you to play the classic ones. And of course, on top of that, if you have any other suggestions for some classic multiplayer games you want me to cover, go ahead and drop them down below and I might check them out. But either way, let's go ahead and jump into the action-packed Star Wars Battlefront multiplayer. The original Battlefront was actually the first online game I ever played. If you want a real in-depth review of the original Battlefront, past just the multiplayer, check out my video here. But back in 2004, young me didn't quite understand online gaming very well. Essentially, someone handed me a controller and a mic and told me I was playing with other people from all over the country. And then before I knew it, my entire life would change after that. I would get put into a almost finished battle on Renvar Harbor. I was put on the Empire and had exactly 0 locations to spawn into. Not only the command posts were taken, but all the AT-ATs would explode seconds before I tried to spawn in. My immediate reaction only makes sense from someone who was a child at the time. I started to basically just scream into the mic like a prepubescent warlord, absolutely freaking out. I couldn't spawn in to help my team, I thought, but in reality I wouldn't be able to help them either way because it was already so far gone. But it didn't take long for my teammates to get absolutely sick of me and tell me to shut up pretty much. Looking back, there had to be some absolutely terrible language used alongside that, but the shut up part is all I remember to this day. I calmed down and actually played a few matches with this lobby, and past that first one I had an absolute blast. Battlefront's multiplayer is very much tied into just the instant action mode of Battlefront. The biggest difference is every now and then you run across a person with a name above their head who just happens to be much better than you. It takes this great fast-paced action game and adds another layer to it. It adds this level of competitiveness where you want to be better than that random guy. On top of that, it adds another level of difficulty. If you're able to just run through the single player instant action and galactic conquest, there's going to be a little bit of a roadblock when you run into another person actually playing against you. It's still a little bit more complicated than the run-of-the-mill multiplayer games at the time, as there's still NPCs running around. There's nothing more startling than having a few enemies turn the corner on you only to find out 2 of the 3 of them are actual people, and then you get your ass blasted. Don't kill me on this comparison because I'm not a MOBA guy, but it feels a lot like a MOBA in this sense. You have these NPCs that are very easy to kill, but then, sort of like the champions come around the corner and then it's actual fight. But of course, instead of the players being big champions with ults and power moves, they're just another clone or rebel trooper, which again adds to another layer of why I love Battlefront. That's what Battlefront is at its core anyway, a way to just play another soldier in these large-scale battles. There seems to be a bit of a meta based around movement, engineer class, and the assault class. This also depends on what type of engineer class your team has and what type of rocket launcher your team has as well. Like how the rebels and droid engineers have a shotgun and the clone and stormtrooper engineers have this really shitty like shock gun. I know I'm gonna catch hate from like the 2 people that are able to use that gun and actually like get shit done with it, but I'm not one of those people. But then on the other hand, the Rebel rocket launcher trooper has a rocket launcher that shoots 2 rockets at once, which is okay if you're in a small encounter with just another person. But if you get matched up against 2 people, you need that second rocket launcher to be ready to swap, change targets really quickly. So that instant fire 2 rockets definitely comes back to bite you every now and then. And to be fair, I will say the original just assault class with the standard rifle in this game is also a very viable option. There are times where you can kind of just storm the rocket launcher trooper over and just get in their face, and make sure you don't cause any separation. And also sort of cause them to freeze up because they can't shoot at their own feet, obviously, and you can pretty easily get a kill out of that. The game mode in multiplayer is just the standard control point capture. The original Battlefront Online was actually pretty bare bones. It was really just the base game with the occasional annoyance of having to fight someone who actually knew what they were doing. But with that being said, it was still a blast. It's actually really funny because Steam just recently, about a year ago, actually brought the servers back online. So up until then, you had no way of playing this game. But for whatever reason, Steam did that, so shout out to them. And to be fair, the servers are pretty lackluster nowadays. It was really hard for me to get into any servers. I would normally jump into a server with only one other person and a few people would trickle in here and there. But overall, it was not easy. But after all of that, it is still playable, which is all that really matters. Well, that was the original Battlefront multiplayer. Let's see what they did to improve on it in the sequel.
Supposed to blow destroyed.
One year later, and to make the deadline of still being relevant thanks to Star Wars 3, Battlefront 2 was released. Battlefront 2 would release in October of 2005, while Star Wars 3 would have released in May of that year. It was pretty obvious that the game's sequels, newest editions, would mainly focus on the content added to the universe in the third movie. One of the first noticeable tells is having the 501st Clone Trooper to be the star of the box art. Since there was only a year gap in between games, there wasn't a lot of changes to be had. You had a few new maps, but in return lost the best map that there was. Bespin platforms, you will be missed. An intro animation. Now you just get a boring loading screen. I just don't know why they did that. But as a whole, the newest additions and features would overwhelmingly outweigh the negative. I really like how they added 2 special classes to each team that can only be unlocked after you earn points either from killing or capturing command posts. And there was no more just single control point as a game mode. There was new game modes to be played. 1 flag, capture the flag, 2 flag, capture the flag, and hunt. Both capture the flags are pretty obvious and self-explanatory, but hunt is actually a really interesting and new fun idea for Star Wars. You're either one of the primary factions versus whatever native alien lives on that planet. So for example, if you play on Endor, one team will be the Stormtroopers and the other team will be everyone's favorite, the Ewoks. The hunted team offers a new way to play as you now have multiple different alien species to play as. Personally, on Hoth, playing as the Wampas is the absolute best way to play this game mode. They're fast, they're big, and they're daunting, and they're just a blast to play. And of course, the game mode I've pushed off up until now is the Heroes versus Villain game mode that they added. For some reason, this mode can only be played on Tatooine Mos Eisley. I'm guessing it's like a Heroes and Villains hanging out as like the bar type of situation, I guess. But either way, this edition was so much fun. I'm glad they put it in there. And honestly, thank God that this dropped after episode 3 because now we could play as General Grievous in-game, the greatest Star Wars villain ever. Honestly though, having Boba Fett, Anakin, Yoda, and so many more playable heroes and villains made this game 100 times better than the original. In the original, the heroes and villains would kind of walk around the map as you just watched them kind of slay the opponents, but now you could actually play as one taking control of the battlefield. Even if the combat playing as a Jedi wasn't like the most in-depth experience you'd have, it was still a blast. But for whatever reason, if you do play heroes versus villains, let me know in the comments. If you play as the villains, you're at this really odd disadvantage. I almost never win as the villains. I don't know what it is in the game, but like the heroes just have this huge advantage for some whatever reason. Even the story mode in Battlefront 2 was leaps better than the original. The original would just play cutscenes from the movies and basically just follow the storyline from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, whereas Battlefront 2 actually filled the gaps from the end of Star Wars Episode 3 to the beginning of Episode 4. This story mode is much more worth your time and I actually do recommend playing it. Unlike the first one, let's talk about a negative that they added, and that would be the space battles. I know there's a minority out there that probably enjoys these, but to me they're just so repetitive. At least with the maps having the same game mode on the planets, to mix it up, you know, there's different maps and some hazards in those maps that were unique. When you're in a space battle, there's almost no noticeable change from space battle to space battle. They're boring, they're repetitive, and even the devs know it. The only story mode maps that can be skipped are the space battles. But I will say, playing it once or twice here and there isn't terrible. It's just playing them over and over again is when it gets a little mind-numbing. I much more preferred when the spaceships were just kind of fighting in the air during the battles instead of having their own section. Now let's talk about the last and greatest upgrade from the original, and that would be my favorite game mode ever, Galactic Conquest. Just comparing screens from the original Galactic Conquest and this one, you can tell there's so much more going on in the new one, and all of these upgrades are so well deserved. This was by far the best game mode in these series. I'm so glad it got so much attention. I know I called the first one a sandbox-like experience, but this one really had you calling all of the shots. You start off as your selected faction with a fleet, a small number of planets, and 1,000 credits. You only have a pilot and assault trooper class unlocked. I really like this because your first 2 to 3 battles only consist of just a bunch of assault class troopers fighting it out. You have to buy bonuses now instead of just owning them with the planet that you own. And thankfully, space battles are still skippable here. The overall experience will even take longer, probably being closer to like an hour and a half instead of being like 30 to 45 minutes. There's a lot less replayability as you have 2 fleets that are moving around the map instead of just replaying the same planets that you have to capture no matter what. Although there's no death ray that you can just destroy a planet if you're losing it too many times. And the make it take it rule from the original is now gone. You get 1 turn to do one thing and then it's the opponent's turn, making it feel like some weird 4D chess game, but overall still a lot of fun. Battlefront 2 was without a doubt an overall better experience compared to the original. More game modes, overall more maps, and the inclusion of all the content from the newest movie. Sure, your trooper could no longer lay down, but who really did that in the original anyway? But let's finally take a look at the multiplayer of Battlefront 2. Well, who would have thought the multiplayer in Battlefront 2 is also almost in every way better than the original. All of the game modes can be played online, so you can beat the ass of your friends as Ewoks, which is something I never thought I could do. The server browser even got an upgrade and looks a lot nicer. All the core classes are now the same, so no matter what team you're on, the engineer and the shock trooper are the way to go. Except maybe droids, because the super battle droid has wrist rockets, but it depends. But with that being said, the map selection is so great. Maps like Yavin for the sniper class is actually like definitely the way to go there. The combat in this game and multiplayer is mostly the same as the last game. There's a few different changes with movement since the player can now sprint. One-on-one engagements feel like a battle of aim and movement more than just aim itself. While any encounter, if in close quarters where you're outnumbered, it just doesn't feel like you have much of a shot. I say that, but there are plenty of times where I had a teammate run up on a guy 2v1 and we both got bodied, probably because we were bad. I'm bad with 2v1s, but that's neither here nor there. Some servers still have it set up where maps have AI mixed with players, while some servers only have players versus players. There even seems to be a way to play mods online, but most of the time the servers were empty or locked. The most common game modes I ran into were Conquest and 2 Flag Capture the Flag. Conquest still worked great, and CTF is a classic online game mode that fits right in. A bombastic, cluttered run for the flag with the quick and shifty engineers, normally how flags get captured, and it's always fun to make those runs with your teammates. So is there a learning curve for Battlefront 2 Online? It does take a bit of getting used to at least be average and be able to hold your own against other opponents. If you have any bit of aim potential, hanging out in the back of some maps as a sharpshooter might be your best bet to get started. My Gito is probably the best I could think of right now. But once you get a little bit more comfortable with the movement aiming, the standard infantry class is probably the best way to go from there. Just be sure to keep engagements to a medium to long range setting. This makes it hard for engineers to pinpoint and actually get those meat shots with the shotgun, and hard for the assault class with the rocket launchers to pinpoint your next move. One thing that's really nice about Battlefront is that it's very easy to tell what class you're going up against. A red droid with a rocket launcher on it is an assault class. Based on this information, you can tell what type of engagement you're going to get into and how far back you should play against him. Now, after you're comfortable with movement and being able to detect what type of enemies are coming at you, moving on to the engineer or assault class is probably your best bet. These classes involve a lot of aim and having the ability to predict enemy movement. Once you get comfortable with landing shots though, hitting meat shots with the engineer is one of the most satisfying feelings in this game. Getting a one-shot kill on another player is the absolute peak of a gaming experience, and it definitely applies here as well. After that, once you get more comfortable and used to the arsenal with the engineer, falling back, healing yourself, and dropping remote bombs becomes second nature. The only downside of the engineer is not having a decent blaster pistol as a secondary. They just have the repair tool, so you have to really stay close quarters with the engineer. It's a blast that takes a bit of getting used to, but once you do it, it's very rewarding. The servers are still pretty empty even for the sequel, but I could very consistently find 2 to 3 servers that were almost full that you could get into. It hasn't really mattered what time of day that I try to get on, there seems to be a decent amount of people populating the servers as of right now. With the base game, there was almost no doubt that everything they did was an upgrade over the original, and I'm going to say that's also true with the multiplayer. In almost every way, this feels just like a better experience over the original. The original Battlefronts were an amazing experience as a kid, and it was a blast to revisit. With EA revisiting the franchise, it's completely understandable to jump on those ones, as those ones are newer, polished, and look fantastic. And honestly, the second one, like I said, is a ton of fun. With that all being said though, it's great that the original servers are still online. Even with the new games being good, sometimes the original just hit a little different. Whether you're a long-term enjoyer of the original Battlefront or first-time player, there's something for you in this franchise. The fact the newest games don't have any form of galactic conquest is definitely where I will fault them, but from just a multiplayer standpoint, Battlefront 2 is still a great game to play. With that being said, the community was pretty to themselves, no insults in chat, and the occasional NS was thrown my way, which felt great. It's a fun experience that can definitely eat up a good amount of time if you have an afternoon where nothing's really going on. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, any other recommendations you have, drop them down below, I might cover them. I have a few games up next that I'm going to cover, but I'm always down for more suggestions. But either way, I'll see you next time. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. If you've not seen my other multiplayer retrospectives, there's 2 currently, Fear and Bioshock 2. Highly recommend watching them. Blast to make, blast to put out there. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this video as well. Subscribe if you want to see more older multiplayer games being covered, and I'll see you next time.